City Council members approve a historic agreement on police oversight as Congress is moving further apart. All that and more, the focus of our Spotlight Politics. Joining us now, Heather Cherone and Paris Schutz. Welcome back, everybody. So a lot to get to. As we heard earlier, a compromise on police oversight passed City Council. Take a look at part of Mayor Lightfoot's impassioned push for votes.
But if people don't feel safe in their homes, if our babies can't be in their beds without the worry of a bullet coming through the window or the wall, nothing else matters.
Now, Heather, you broke down the votes for us a little bit earlier, but remind us what that was, and was this sort of a strange coalition of the ayes?
So it was 36 to 13, and they needed 34 votes. So this was a razor thin margin, and 10 of those 13 votes were from white aldermen who represent areas of the city where a lot of police officers live. But also it won the support of people like Alderman Raymond Lopez, who usually votes against police misconduct settlements. And he said that he voted for it because he wants those police misconduct settlements to end. And this is seen as the best attempt to sort of build trust in the police department among Black and Latino Chicagoans after truly decades of being at odds.
And also, where did Alderman Burke come down on this?
He voted again. He voted, you know what? That's a good question. I will have to check that. You surprised me.
Surprise!
He voted no. I remember hearing him vote, and I'm pretty sure he voted no, and Ray Lopez voted yes.
Okay, thank you, Paris. So here's Alderman Nick Sposato. He voted against the ordinance, listed the oversight that he says already exists. Here he is.
We already have 11 oversights that I see, and I'm going to read them off to you. AG, body cameras, consent decree, COPA, DOJ, FBI, IAD, IG, Illinois Torture Board, Police Board, State's Attorney, Supervisors, and if you want to talk about community involvement, we can include DAC and CAPS, all right? So we're talking about, no, we don't want to defund the police, but that's in essence what we're doing here.
Heather, is he right? Is this, as the Fraternal Order of Police President John Catanzara says, is it redundant?
Well, it really depends on what you mean by oversight. So all of those agencies that we heard Alderman Sposato list off have some role in holding officers accused of misconduct accountable. What none of those agencies do is set policy for the police department. And that's really what will be at the center of this new panel's job. They will also be able to take a no confidence vote in the police superintendent and have a say in who should lead the COPA, the civilian office in charge of investigating police misconduct. So it's a little bit apples and oranges, but that was the main argument of opponents against this proposal, that there's already enough oversight. Nobody needs any bureaucracy, and officers who are already sort of feeling the pressure don't need to feel like they're under any closer scrutiny as they try to get a handle on a various surge of violent crime centered on the south and west sides. And yes, Alderman Burke voted no. I checked the tape.
Okay, nice work. So Paris, the mayor, we know she campaigned on civilian oversight, but this does not change the mayor's control over the hiring and firing of the police superintendent. Tell us more.
Well, I mean, this, as I said earlier, this is a signature legislative achievement for the mayor, and this comes as we were wondering about whether she was losing control over city council and things devolving and people bickering with each other, and then all of a sudden over the weekend, a lot of alder people get together and this compromise gets hashed out that makes community groups happy and keeps the ultimate authority here with the mayor, because the commission can recommend to fire the superintendent and the mayor can say, no, I don't agree with that. And she can also veto policy. And then the city council comes in and has a role here too. And I mean, it's really interesting because this is a debate that's been going on for 4 years, and there were various camps and community groups that it seemed like no one was ever going to agree on what to do here. And all of a sudden, it seemed like out of nowhere, they come up with this compromise. So, I mean, the mayor showing some legislative effectiveness here in getting those 36 votes to approve this big initiative.
So a new report details how the Chicago Police Department was unprepared to handle the protests, the unrest, the violence, and the looting after last summer after George Floyd's murder. Now, this is not the first report to detail the department's failures. The city's outgoing watchdog released a report in February. Chicago Police Department did their own. This 464-page report from the CPD Federal Monitor Maggie Hickey tops the pile, of course. Heather, does this one have more teeth because of her position overseeing the federal consent decree?
Yes. So the Inspector General of the city, Joseph Ferguson, is purely advisory, right? But Maggie Hickey is somebody who would go to the federal judge and say, look, here's what the police department did wrong, and they aren't correcting this. And her report was really scathing because all along the mayor said, look, nobody expected these kind of protests. Nobody expected this kind of unrest. Well, Maggie Hickey said, sure, but even if you had advanced knowledge of these protests, the police department was completely unprepared to handle them because of significant and systematic failures to prepare for those sort of events. And I think that is really at the heart of what the police department is going to have to address when it goes back in front of that judge, as it will periodically for the foreseeable future.
Okay, so let's move on to some state politics. We know that Governor J.B. Pritzker, he is announcing his bid for a second term. Take a look at his interview with Paris yesterday.
We've been getting our fiscal house in order, and we've been making government work for Illinois families. And so when I think about running for re-election, that's why I'm running for re-election. It's because we have so much more that we can do.
Heather, is anybody surprised by this after he moved more than $30 million into his campaign account months ago?
They shouldn't be, even though, of course, he declined to say several weeks ago when we had him on the show that he was definitely running for re-election, and then everybody got sort of worked up that maybe he wasn't going to. But it's clear that the governor sees that he has a lot more work to do, and he only had about half a term before the pandemic hit and really reordered all of his priorities. So there's no doubt that his response to the pandemic will be at the center of the campaign, but he's also sort of trying to look forward and say, look, here's what else we need to get done. Here's what we needed to do before the pandemic, which of course has already really laid all of those problems out there for all of us to see.
Paris, remind us who some of the potential rivals are.
Well, on the Republican side right now, you've got State Senator Darren Bailey from downstate Louisville, who's been a chief critic. He's taken Pritzker to court over some of the shutdown mandates. You've got Gary Rabin, a suburban Chicago businessman, and Paul Schimpf, a former Republican Illinois state senator. But I find it really interesting that Governor Pritzker yesterday didn't want to talk about COVID. He kept wanting to talk about things like free college tuition for Illinoisans earning the median income or less, expanded child care. And this echoes the things that President Biden is saying and national Democrats are saying. And what I take away from that is this is a coordinated sort of message here for 2022, the midterms, that Democrats believe that this is the kind of message that will get their voters out when midterm election is always difficult for the party that currently holds the White House. The opposition party usually is more motivated to get out, and this is going to be a very closely watched midterm. So Governor Pritzker laying out things like free college education. We're talking about a state that is $200 billion in the hole in terms of pension obligations. I thought that was pretty interesting, but I presume that that's going to be sort of the get out the vote messaging strategy from Democrats.
And Paris, remind us how much because we know he's a billionaire, remind us how much he spent on his campaign the first time around and how much he's, possibly willing to spend this time.
Well, I think it was like 171 billion, million the first time. What's the difference? 171 million the first time, and I think the total spending came out to about $250 million, was like the most expensive governor's race in history, save for a race in California. Now, remember, he was taking on another billionaire or multi-hundred millionaire, Bruce Rauner, so the stakes were high. They were both spending a lot of money here. I don't know that you're going to see that kind of spending here if these remain the only three candidates on the Republican side. But then if you see a very wealthy self-funder like a Ken Griffin, and I have no reason to believe Ken Griffin, the state's richest man, is going to enter this race, then you might see the crazy amount of spending that we saw 4 years ago.
All right, and a quick, look at Capitol Hill. Speaker Nancy Pelosi asked Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy to replace Representatives Jim Jordan and Jim Banks on the January 6th committee. Full-blown war erupting over this investigatory committee. Take a look.
This investigation must go forward. The idea that anybody would be playing politics with an attack on the United States Capitol is despicable and is disgraceful.
Unless Speaker Pelosi reverses course and seats all 5 Republicans, we will not participate.
Now, Paris Representative Rodney Davis, a downstate congressman, was also chosen for that panel. Could he just serve alongside Liz Cheney and ignore Minority Leader McCarthy?
No, I doubt it. I mean, I think Representative Davis is a loyal Republican. The Minority Leader, Republican Leader Kevin McCarthy, yanked all the members in response to this very surprise move from House Speaker Pelosi. So I don't think he's gonna buck his Minority Leader and choose to serve. There is some talk about perhaps Pelosi putting Adam Kinzinger on that panel, who's been as critical of the insurrectionists and President Trump as Liz Cheney. So we don't know what's going to happen, but it is important for that panel to have a bipartisan sheen so that folks trust what they come up with, because it's very important that they do get to the bottom of everything that caused that, all the failures that happened. So however that happens, lawmakers should really put a priority on that.
All right. Busy day in politics. My thanks to Spotlight Politics team, Heather Cherone and Schutz, of course.